On the night of October 1 Est, 1983, a small group of friends entered Driebelbis Cave in Berks County, Pennsylvania. The cave, tucked into farmland near Kutztown, was a familiar place for local spelunkers. Among them was Robert E. Scott, 36 years old, an experienced amateur caver who often sought adventure beneath the limestone ridges. They had spent hours underground, exploring narrow passages and winding chambers, when fatigue and the late hour convinced the group it was time to retreat. The exit lay only 75 feet from where they gathered, a distance of about 23 meters. Yet between them and the surface was a jagged fissure that squeezed down to barely 7 or 8 inches wide, less than 20 centimeters. Robert Scott, moving last in line, attempted the climb up this vertical slot. He had negotiated it before, but this night his body slipped sideways into the constriction. The rock pressed against his ribs, locking him in place. What began as a routine exit from a local cave would, within hours, spiral into one of the most desperate and tragic cave rescues in American history. Driebelbis Cave was not a famous tourist attraction, nor a destination marked on guidebooks. It lay hidden on private farmland, its entrance concealed by brush and stone, leading into a labyrinth of passages carved by water over millennia. The cave stretched deep into the earth, with vertical fissures, low crawls, and chambers connected by narrow cuts in the limestone. Inside, the temperature held steady at around 55 degrees Fahrenheit, roughly 13 degrees Celsius. The air was damp, heavy with the mineral scent of wet rock, and the darkness swallowed all sense of distance. That evening, the world above had already quieted into early autumn. The sky over Berks County was clear, the air crisp but not freezing, typical for a Pennsylvania night in October. No rain had fallen in recent days, and no storm threatened. From the outside, conditions seemed favorable. There was no sign that danger might be waiting just below the surface. The group carried basic caving gear, helmets fitted with headlamps, spare flashlights, gloves, and simple ropes for climbing the tighter shafts. They were not novices, each had been inside Driebelbis before, but their preparation was casual, suited more for an evening's adventure than for a drawn-out ordeal. They brought snacks and water, but no specialized rescue equipment. There was confidence in their familiarity, a quiet belief that the cave was known, predictable, and manageable. As they moved deeper, the subtle warnings went unnoticed. The rock walls sweated with condensation, making handholds slick. The passageways, though familiar, shifted in feel with every crawl, slight changes in width or angles that pressed harder on the body. The vertical slot near the entrance, one of the cave's tightest bottlenecks, had always been challenging, yet it was remembered with a shrug, something uncomfortable but passable. The thought that this squeeze could become a deadly trap did not cross anyone's mind. What appeared ordinary, almost routine, carried within it the seeds of catastrophe. A small miscalculation, a slip at the wrong angle, could turn the harmless constriction into an inescapable coffin of stone. The group began their ascent toward the entrance. The narrow fissure that led upward was steep and unforgiving, an 80-foot, about 24-meter, vertical cut in the limestone that narrowed to just 7 or 8 inches across, barely 18-20 centimeters. Each explorer took their turn. One by one, they wriggled and pressed their way upward, scraping through the pinch with practiced discomfort. When it came to Robert Scott's turn, fatigue weighed on his body. Hours underground had sapped his strength, and the damp chill of 55 degrees Fahrenheit, 13 CE, clung to his muscles. He entered the fissure feet first, twisting his shoulders to align with the constriction. At first, he inched upward, pushing with his legs, using elbows for leverage. Then, in a single moment of misstep, his boot slipped. His body shifted sideways, ribs colliding with rock. The crack embraced him like a vice. Scott tried to force his chest through, but every inhalation expanded his ribcage against the limestone. Each breath made the pressure worse. The rock dug into his side, squeezing air from his lungs. He exhaled sharply, hoping the reduced volume would allow him to slide free. Instead, the stone caught harder, as if the cave itself had locked shut around him. Panic spread instantly through his body. His voice echoed down the shaft, short gasps, muttered curses, then louder cries. The other cavers, already through the squeeze, turned back. They saw his helmet light wedged in the blackness, his torso immobile. They shouted encouragement, telling him to relax, to exhale slowly. But Robert's breaths came faster, shallow and ragged, reverberating off the cold walls. One of the group reached back down, stretching an arm toward him. Fingers grazed his glove, but could not pull him upward. They tried ropes, pushing them down to his waist. The angles were cruel. The fissure was too narrow to loop the line properly, too tight to apply leverage. Every attempt tightened his prison. The cave amplified his distress. His labored breathing bounced in metallic echoes. Water dripped rhythmically from the ceiling, a constant reminder of time slipping past. Their headlamps threw harsh cones of light, leaving the surrounding chambers drowned in shadow. Beyond the beam, the darkness seemed infinite, pressing as heavily as the stone itself. Minutes stretched into an hour. Scott struggled, twisting violently, only to wedge himself deeper. His side scraped raw against the limestone. His legs kicked against the rock, unable to find purchase. He shouted again, anger, desperation, disbelief. Each cry dissolved into the cave's silence. His companions realized the situation was no longer a minor inconvenience. They tried to calm him, urging him to conserve energy. But the fear was contagious. The thought that someone could become trapped, barely 75 feet, 23 meters, from daylight felt unreal. The earth was supposed to give way with enough effort, yet here it remained immovable. The temperature inside the cave felt colder by the minute. Moisture condensed on their helmets and gloves. Muscles trembled, not just from chill, but from the dawning awareness that this was no ordinary stuck cavern. Scott's breathing grew erratic. He moaned, then lashed out, slamming his hand against the stone in frustration. The limestone did not yield. What had begun as a routine exit now spiraled into dread. The group faced a decision. Their own efforts were failing. They could continue to tug and pull, risking injury to Scott, or they could admit the truth. This situation demanded outside help. In the darkness of Driebelbis Cave, Robert Scott remained wedged in the fissure, chest compressed, breath shallow. His friends scrambled toward the surface to call for rescue. Deep below, the stone held him fast, as if the cave itself had decided he would not leave without a fight. When the first calls for help reached the surface, the local fire department responded quickly, but even seasoned rescuers knew that caves presented challenges unlike any other environment. Driebelbis Cave was narrow, twisting, and unforgiving. Getting specialized equipment down to where Robert Scott was trapped required crawling through the same tight passages that had ensnared him. By dawn on Sunday morning, volunteers from nearby caving clubs and trained rescue personnel had assembled. Ropes, pulleys, and harnesses were hauled to the entrance, along with oxygen tanks, heat lamps, and medical supplies. 14 rescuers from Pittsburgh, experienced in cave operations, arrived to join the effort. Their mission was clear: keep Robert alive, keep him calm, and somehow free him from the fissure that had closed around him. At first, rescuers tried simple methods. They looped ropes around his torso, attempting to pull him upward inch by inch. The fissure, however, was less than 8 inches wide, barely 20 centimeters pinching at his ribs and hips. The harder they pulled, the more the limestone scraped his body, locking him deeper. They switched tactics, inserting inflatable air bladders beneath him. Slowly, the bags expanded, nudging his chest upward. For a moment, his body shifted. Hope surged in the chamber. Then the bladder slipped sideways, wedging into a crack, its pressure wasted against immovable stone. Scott's condition fluctuated. At times he spoke lucidly, asking for coffee or joking bitterly with rescuers. Other times he erupted in panic, shouting obscenities, thrashing violently, only to collapse back into gasping silence. He suffered from epilepsy, a condition that worried the medics on site. To calm him, doctors proposed sedation, but authorization never came. Local regulations required written approval. A Dr. Caver in California was contacted, but the line failed before consent could be secured. The chance slipped away. Meanwhile, the cave's cold pressed in. The ambient temperature of 55 degrees Fahrenheit, about 13 C, was enough to drain the body over hours. Rescuers set up heat lamps, fed warm air through hairdryers, and pressed heated packs against his body. He was given hot broth, donuts, and even hot dogs, pushed carefully through the gap. Oxygen flowed through a tube to his face. Yet none of it eased the crushing pressure on his ribs. He remained pinned, forced to breathe in shallow bursts. Hours dragged into a full day. Each attempt met failure. The ropes cut into his harness. The pulleys slipped against wet rock. The plastic sheeting used as a lubricant only added to the chaos. Scott groaned, then shouted, then fell eerily quiet. His rescuers watched the light on his helmet flicker in the dark, a haunting reminder of how close he was to life and how far from freedom. Every new plan seemed to offer hope for only a moment. A rescuer wedged beside him thought they could free his arm, then realized the angle was too steep. Another inflated a larger bladder that lifted him half an inch before deflating under the strain. The more time passed, the more the cave itself seemed to tighten its grip. By late Sunday night, Robert had been stuck for over 24 hours. His strength was fading. The rescuers were exhausted too, bruised from squeezing into impossible angles, their voices hoarse from shouting encouragement. They refused to abandon him, but their tools and their strength were no match for the geometry of stone. What had begun as a local rescue was turning into a desperate vigil. Each failed attempt carried heavier silence. Every groan from Robert echoed with the knowledge that time was running out. In Driebelbis Cave, hope and despair now coexisted in the narrowest of spaces, balanced on the edge of the stone that refused to give. By early Monday morning, nearly 30 hours had passed since Robert Scott became trapped. The rescuers had cycled through every technique they knew: ropes, pulleys, inflatable bladders, lubrication, heating packs. Each strategy had offered a glimmer of hope, and each had ended in disappointment. The limestone fissure, just 7 to 8 inches wide, 18-20 centimeters, had become an iron cage. Scott's body had endured more than most men could withstand. His chest was compressed by the rock, forcing him to breathe shallowly. Every inhalation was a struggle, every exhalation a plea. He tried to remain alert, joking at times, asking for warm drinks, but his voice grew weaker. His companions noted the change. His sentences trailed off. His eyes closed more often. His headlamp beam flickered against the stone. Shortly after dawn, the rescuers noticed a shift. His breathing became irregular. His chest no longer rose with the same effort. They pressed oxygen toward his mouth, pumped heated air into the chamber, urged him to respond. For a brief moment he stirred, murmuring incoherent words. Then his head slumped forward. The fissure echoed only with the sound of dripping water. Medics confirmed what the rescuers feared. His pulse was faint, then absent. His body temperature had dropped, his skin cool beneath their hands. They continued their efforts, refusing to surrender. For hours, they pushed tubes of oxygen, massaged his chest, pleaded with him to fight. Yet the cave gave nothing back. The stone pressed on, silent and unmoving. At 7:00 a.m., after nearly a day and a half underground, Robert Scott slipped away. The cause was later reported as cardiac arrest brought on by shock, cold and relentless compression of his chest. In the language of rescue, it was a non-survivable entrapment. In the language of those who watched him fade, it was heartbreak. Even in death, the cave did not easily release him. His body remained wedged in the fissure. Hours later, rescuers resorted to mechanical force, attaching cables and pulling with raw strength until, at 12:25 p.m., he was finally brought to the surface. The sight was devastating. The man they had fought to save for nearly 30 hours now lay motionless beyond their reach. The moment marked a cruel truth: the earth beneath our feet is indifferent. Limestone, water, and gravity had conspired into a geometry no human strength could defeat. The rescuers, hardened by years of training, wept openly. They had been so close, less than 75 feet, 23 meters from daylight. Yet those final inches had proven impossible. Driebelbis Cave had claimed Robert Scott, not in a dramatic flood or collapse, but in silence, pressure, and time. His final hours were defined not by surrender, but by endurance, an agonizing struggle that ended only when his body could struggle no more. When Robert Scott's body was finally brought out of Driebelbis Cave on that Monday afternoon, silence hung over the farmland. Friends, rescuers, and family members stood in disbelief. They had been so close to the surface, yet the outcome was irreversible. The news spread quickly across Pennsylvania and through the caving community nationwide. It was a sobering reminder that not all rescues end in triumph. In the days that followed, investigators confirmed that Scott had died from cardiac arrest brought on by cold, exhaustion, and prolonged compression of his chest. His epilepsy, once feared as a possible trigger, played no role. Instead, it was the cave itself, unyielding limestone, geometry too cruel to outwit, that sealed his fate. For the caving world, the tragedy became a warning. Familiar caves could still kill. Proper equipment, rigorous planning, and respect for narrow passages were no longer optional. They were matters of survival. Driebelbis Cave, once a casual destination for local explorers, carried a new reputation, a place where complacency had turned deadly. To this day, the story lingers as a reminder that beneath the ground, the rules are not ours to write. If only one more decision had been different, one more precaution taken, perhaps Robert Scott's story would have ended above ground, in the light.